the third episode of the Snakeman's Lair. Now, before we start, I'd like to say a couple of things about the platform that I'm using. This it's called Haps, and indeed it allows me to multicast this video on several other platforms such as YouTube. And if you want to get all the updates and such on upcoming broadcasts, then I highly encourage you to download this the Haps app on your phone, or subscribe to it through your laptop. All right, so now formalities over. Let's introduce our guest of today, a very special guest that I'm extremely happy to have here. An incredible biologist and conservationist from Canada. So please, everyone, give a warm welcome to Becky Friesen. Hi, Becky. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, well, absolutely. So to give a brief introduction, yeah, indeed, Becky is, well, it's not that easy because you've done so much stuff that it takes quite a...
I'm really all over the place. I struggle introducing myself too.
So yeah, it takes me a while to wrap my head around that, basically. But still, so let's since for the first two episodes, we started from the beginning and then onwards. This time I'd like to do a more of a rewind approach. So right now you reside in your hometown, Lethbridge in Canada, and so you moved back to Lethbridge last year or the year before that. Sorry, I can't exactly recall. So at least before the pandemic hit, at least what led you to move back home, and what exactly are you working on in Alberta?
That's a huge question. So I finished my master's degree and I was studying in Mexico as an international student. So I finished that in 2019. So by then I was a little bit homesick, and also a lot of people said you should just stay in Mexico and work, there would be so much work for you. I had a master's degree and being bilingual is a big deal in Mexico. So a lot of people encouraged that. But to make a long story short, biology jobs are not that common anywhere in the world, and much less in Mexico. And if I had stayed there, for example, to try and work in a national park or to do some kind of field consulting job or in a university, I kind of didn't feel right about it, because there's so many qualified Mexican biologists and there's so few jobs. So morally, I was kind of I don't really want to do that. And also in terms of just labor standards, hours of work and workers' rights and minimum wage and stuff is so different in Canada. So I just decided to come home. But with that being said, I came home after my master's, and then I went back after 6 months to Mexico to do a project in the Monarch Butterfly Reserve. So I didn't really, I came home, but never permanently anywhere.
Oh yeah, that's already a very something that at least in my experience you don't hear that much. You don't hear very much, at least not until recent years. Not wanting to take up space from local people when you move to another country. Something that we will definitely go back to more in detail later on. So for now, let's focus more on your current circumstances in Canada. So I remember by following your Instagram, which, by the way, I highly encourage everyone to do. Becky is an amazing science communicator, and it will, I dare say, it would be pretty much eye-opening to read what she has to say. So please go follow her on social media. And so indeed, I remember seeing your post when you were applying for a wealth of jobs in in Canada. So in the end, what did you go for?
Yeah, well, last year I ended up with a job in consulting. So I was like, it was a new thing for me. Essentially, I was like getting frogs off of construction sites, which was fun because frogs are cool, but kind of like conflicting because it's just kind of a strange thing as a conservationist to be like working on a construction site where like the ecosystems are being altered. So it was interesting, but that was just temporary. And then I kept applying for jobs through the winter, and now I ended up working for Parks Canada for our national park system. And I'm coordinating a program that is basically like trying to bring people who face barriers to the outdoors, like outdoor recreation, people who are low income or people who are immigrants or who are marginalized or who are families with like young kids. Literally, the whole point of the program is to make it possible and more easy for them to enjoy like camping and wildlife and visiting national parks. So I'm still getting used to it. I've only been there for 2 months, but so far it's pretty cool.
Oh well, that's great. That's absolutely great to hear, and that again something that that would be very interesting to expand upon, because like you mentioned like two points that to me are very important. Like first, that yeah, even as a conservationist, like you've had to face somewhat uncomfortable realities, like with, of course, with all the ideals and principles that you have. Then you found yourself working at a construction site, trying to limit the damage from alteration of the environment, which you were witnessing before, like happening like firsthand. And then again, the issue of social justice in the outdoors world, which happens even in a country like Canada, which is, at least from I'm talking as a European, is very often often idealized here, like as a model idyllic world where everything is nice and perfect. But so what is the situation regarding environmental policies and in terms of social justice as well in the environmental world in Canada, based on your experience and also what you know from colleagues there?
Yeah, it's interesting that you make that point about people like idealizing how it goes in Europe, because people do the exact same thing here. I always hear like, oh, like, isn't Canada like everybody's rich and there's no crime and there's no racism? Like, people, especially in Mexico, would always say that to me. So that's not the case. We have plenty of issues. I'm really grateful that we have some of the laws in place.
Looks like.
Can you still hear me? Did I cut out?
Oh yeah, the connection went down for a second, so I think we missed the last part.
Oh,
okay. Now it's all good. At least I think so. If
let me know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least if anyone has troubles like hearing or following the live, please let us know in the comments, in the comment section, and we will act on it.
Be with us, gods of internet. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, now it should be. Now it seems. It seems good. So yeah, let's try and see how it goes from now on. Yeah. So you were saying, Becky?
Maybe yes. No. Maybe.
Yes. Now it works.
Okay.
I should really stop saying that. So yeah, let's see, because maybe Becky's Wi-Fi is having some issues. Okay, now you're back. Okay, now I think we can hear you again. So yeah, let's try. Let's give it let's give it another go. Oh my God, it's like it's doing it on purpose. Okay, so so guys, Becky just messaged me. She is checking she's checking her second laptop to see if the signal works better on there. So maybe it might be a computer issue. In the meantime, yeah, I was just saying that indeed what we hear here in Europe about Canada is indeed that it's like Becky herself said, heaven on earth. So I've actually since I see that quite a lot of people are here. If let's see, I'm curious about your perspective on the matter. If you know anything about your native country, like why don't you share at least some perspective about what actually is the situation here compared to what people think about the natural environment in your country. Oh, so basically we have another unexpected foe in the form of Becky's cat, which is tearing around in the background. So
I can see his tail, like.
All right, so
okay,
now
I might be connected now.
All right, perfect. So do you think it's sorted now?
Yeah, I think like if I open my other one, I think it won't connect because they're on the same Wi-Fi. So I think like I would have to close this and open the next one. But
all right,
let me stick with it for now.
Yes.
So
yeah,
yeah.
Back to what
So I
you
was
were
saying
saying.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you make the comment about people like idealizing Europe because people do that with Canada too, especially when I was in Mexico. People would always say like, "Oh, is it true that like there's no crime and there's no racism?" And like they have this idea of like a utopia. So that's definitely not the case. Um, in terms of like the construction, I'm grateful that we have a lot of the laws in place that do like prevent or like regulate environmental protection in some way. It's far from being enough. Like we definitely need more, but I'm grateful that we have more than in a lot of other countries. For example, in Mexico, the environmental regulations exist, but they're not really enforced. So like for example, Canadian companies go and do like a crazy amount of mining there, and they completely destroy the environment, which is something that they would do here too if they were allowed, but they're not. So we know that they will get away with whatever they can. So there's definitely room for improvement here. And in terms of inclusion, like we do have a lot of issues with racism, especially against our First Peoples, our Indigenous people in Canada. Like in terms of the statistics, like they're the ones that suffer the most. And and after them, all kinds of different immigrants that suffer a lot of racism and underrepresentation in all kinds of fields as well. So same issues as anywhere else in the world. We just have a very good PR person, I think.
So yes, from what you're saying, I can imagine that Indigenous people also play a prominent role in the conservation discourse in Canada, or at least they are on the front line when it comes to protecting their ancestral land and their ancestral sites from what we often improperly call development.
Exactly. Yeah. Like our Indigenous peoples obviously are the first conservationists, the best conservationists. They know how to manage everything in the most ideal way. And it's only very, very recently, like to my knowledge, obviously, because I've been out of Canada for a while, but to my knowledge, it's only very recently that we're actually taking that information into account, actively trying to compensate them for their knowledge, to actually involve them in the system, instead of just like trying to like harvest the information but not actually giving anything back, you know, like trying to actively hire them and employ them and try to put that knowledge to use at repairing the damage that we've caused. So I mean, I've seen steps in the right direction. It's far from perfect at this point, but I'm optimistic.
Oh yeah, that's very interesting, because you also you saying that it is only recently that the importance of indigenous knowledge is being valued in terms of conservation. So do you think there was so to what extent do you think there is prejudice against, or at least there was prejudice against indigenous knowledge in the scientific community, not in Canada, but also perhaps elsewhere, based on your experience, like scientists not trusting anything that is not published in peer-reviewed journals and such?
Yeah, it's huge. Like the prejudice against, even like in the scientific community, is huge. It's only just the prejudice against Indigenous knowledge, especially in the scientific community, like in society in general, but including the scientific community, is huge. It is just only becoming something we're paying attention to, and it's only been in the last few years that Indigenous people have actively been included in government. In positions of power is a big deal, and we're just only taking the very first baby steps.
Oh yeah, well then that's at least it's good to hear that something is changing, and as long as the road might still be, because like from your words I can imagine there's still a very long way to go. There's still much work to be done, and this here in Europe. I mean, we can't really relate, at least not. There are still Indigenous peoples in Europe, but depending on which country you're in. But I've heard definitely very similar stories from Australia or the US or even Brazil. Latin America, where indigenous communities are still heavily discriminated against, if not downright persecuted, despite their invaluable knowledge and effort in the protection of in nature conservation. And so now, leaving Canada behind, let's go back to the previous stage of your life and your career, which you mentioned already. So you did your master's. You completed your master's in Mexico at the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León. Still working on that Spanish pronunciation, and so indeed, this is also something that is not exactly that common, because you hear a lot about researchers and scientists from let's say the Western countries going to work in the tropics, but not of like students from Canada or the United States or Europe going to study in Latin America or Asia or Africa. So what drove you to choose Mexico as the ideal place to finish your master's degree?
Yeah, there were a lot of factors. Mostly was money, because I couldn't afford to do a master's in Canada, and I wasn't I love to do research, but doing a master's is quite I don't know how it is in Italy. Maybe it's similar, but like in Canada, it's very low paid and it's expensive, and you have to do a lot of TA-ships and like spend a lot of time like teaching and like not actually doing your master's degree. So for me, like I wasn't interested in that. Like if I'm doing a master's degree, I want to focus on it, and I want to not like go into so much debt for it. So like honestly, I wasn't even really thinking of doing a master's degree until I saw this scholarship in Mexico that would allow me to do the research and focus on the fun part and the part that I'm good at and the part that's like a professional development for me. and not having to worry about the money and spending all the time on the TA ships. Meanwhile, to be paid like $3 an hour for it or whatever the rate is. So, yeah, so I got this scholarship, and I just always really loved Mexico. I had spent time in Mexico before, and had lots of friends there. I had actually a Mexican friend who was the one who connected me with my master's supervisor. So that was kind of like a personal connection. So it was kind of a no-brainer.
Oh well, yeah, that's indeed well, perfectly like what anyone would say about. But yeah, this sounds like what a lot of students think of when choosing future directions in their career. But yeah, I need the fact that you did it in Mexico, and also raises another point that I wanted to discuss with you, in which you addressed yourself repeatedly throughout your work, the fact that there is a lot of prejudice in Western countries about education in the developing world, to use another term that I personally don't like at all, lacking alternatives. So there is this idea a lot of times that education in Europe or in America or Australia, or you name it, is inherently and inevitably better than in a country like Mexico or other, like, let's say, less, again, often termed less developed countries. So that I can already tell it's absolute bullcrap. I don't know what the policy on swear words is on HAPS, but still that's how it is. Deal with it. But then yeah, what I was curious to hear your firsthand experience with that.
Yeah, a lot of people told me that too. Like, oh, not a lot of people, but I did have comments from people at the university saying like, oh, maybe it's not the best idea, and how are your credits going to transfer, and worried about like my future in the field. But like for me, I wasn't so much worried about the master's being a stepping stone to later do something else. I was interested in the actual master's, like the actual work I was going to do, and that having value, because it does. Like, I don't agree with that idea that like everything you do has to be a step towards something else. It is, because that's how life works. But when you plan it that way, I think it just helps. It makes us be really close-minded about the different experiences that we're open to. So, yeah, I'm really glad I did it, despite, kind of the warnings that I had. It's a world-class university, and they have many in Mexico. So it was definitely like there were a lot of like challenges associated with it, but it was worth it, and I would do it again.
Oh yeah, well that's exactly what that's exactly what we were talking about, and indeed, it's like you rightfully said that Mexico has many world class university, and I'm happy that you had such a great experience there. I never went there personally, but yeah, I have collaborated with a research group from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México in Mexico City. Yeah, when they mostly focus on snake venom, and they do such great research. Like they always turn out absolutely great papers. So indeed, it doesn't matter. Like, I challenge anyone to just go read their papers and raise their eyebrows because they work in Mexico. That would absolutely be total nonsense. But yeah, back to the work that you did in Mexico. You were focusing on, you did a lot of work on butterflies, including perhaps the most famous of all, the monarch butterfly. So what exactly was your research about?
Yeah, well, I studied a forest fire, which is a whole can of worms, and it's kind of different everywhere you go. Exactly what the issue around forest fires is it too much, too many, or too few, or who knows? But so I studied a forest fire, and I basically just compared the butterfly communities in the area that had been burned, and then in an adjacent area that wasn't burned. So a lot of interesting results for that, because on one hand, intuitively, you might think, oh, there's fewer butterflies where it was burned because there's fewer resources. But then on the other hand, once I started reading more, I was like, oh, but actually it makes sense that there would be more butterflies, because when the forest is burned down, then the flowers grow and butterflies drink from flowers. But then even a step further, it's actually not that black and white either, because it depends which are the species that use those open habitats and which are the species that need those intact forests. And of course, in the intact forests, it's a lot of more specialized species, maybe endemic species that need that specialized habitat to survive. And those are the ones that are the most threatened. Meanwhile, if you have an open habitat, there might be a lot of butterflies, but they're butterflies that would just, you could find them anywhere. They're not particularly meaningful to that specific ecosystem, a forest ecosystem. So that was kind of like in a nutshell how it went. And I did get to work with the monarch butterflies, but they only go through that region of Mexico in November and like March, because it's on the migration path. It's not actually the final destination, but it was amazing. Like when I did go into the field and recorded them, like there were so many of them for one field trip. And then like the one before and the one after, not a monarch butterfly in sight. But I was also lucky enough to then later visit the in central Mexico, where they do spend the winter. And like, oh my God, it's like being in a fairy tale, because they're like, if you find a tree that's got a monarch butterfly colony on it, you can't even physically see the tree. You can't see the bark, you can't see the branches, you can't see the leaves. It's literally just like a huge ball of monarch butterflies. It's really amazing.
Oh yeah, so if in case someone in the audience is not familiar with what you were talking about, so yeah, indeed, the monarch butterfly migration, for the little that I know about it, is an absolutely insane phenomenon to witness. So could you maybe tell us more about like why these butterflies migrate and how long they travel for?
Oh my God, that's wow. I mean, there's so many aspects of the monarch butterfly migration that aren't even 100% kind of nailed down. Nothing is in science, but there's so many questions about it still. So I can't even tell you for sure, but I mean, that's like a whole, like I feel like a whole university class. I mean, so they migrate because of the cold, obviously, is a factor, because they do spend the summer in the United States and Canada. But there's a lot of theories, because there's plenty of animals that don't migrate. There's plenty of butterflies that don't migrate, and they just spend the winter under a piece of tree bark. So there's a lot of theories around that. One of which is like an evolutionary thing, that there's this parasite called OE. It's a protozoan parasite that affects the monarch butterflies. So one theory is like an evolutionary theory that like kind of to purge the population of those butterflies that are really susceptible to that parasitic infection or parasitic infestation. So, I mean, that's a theory, but like there are many theories about why. So they go to Mexico, they spend the winter, like around like November, December until like March. It takes them, oh my gosh, I can't even remember how long it takes them. Several weeks to fly. When they go down from Canada, it's the exact same individuals that leave Canada and that arrive in Mexico and spend the whole winter. So those butterflies live for like 8 months. Like they have a crazy long lifespan as adults. And then on the migration back, there's various generations. So they lay eggs and they die, and then the babies continue, and then that happens. So that's like the grand babies and great grandbabies that actually arrive. So oh my gosh, there is like so much to say about the monarch butterfly migration. It is one of the wonders of the world. Like I could truly go on for hours.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely not going to stop you, so feel free.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, and like in terms of like the science, I mean, there's so many questions to ask and so many things to study, but obviously like they deserve all of the fame that they have. And then also at the same time, I find myself playing kind of like a wildlife PR person, where I'm like, the monarch butterflies deserve their fame, but then there's also so many underrated other butterflies that nobody cares about because they don't do that migration, but they do so many other cool things. So I find myself trying to balance the attention that I give to different species, because they're also cool.
Yeah, that's the always the problem with like super charismatic species, that they tend to overshadow everything else that also happens to live in their habitat. Yeah, so indeed, talking about all the butterfly species that you worked with. So on your Instagram, for instance, you also share detailed accounts of how you interact with them. What are the day-to-day your day-to-day tasks were when it came to trapping them and assessing their conditions and such. So how does what does like work with butterfly communities entail, at least for what was it like for your project?
It's not. I mean, I feel like field biologists, like we always share the most photogenic aspects of our work because some very photogenic aspects. But in reality, like butterflies are disgusting. Like everything they eat is disgusting. They love beer. Anything rotten, like butterflies are on it. Rotten fruit, rancid meat, excrement, alcohol, like anything that's disgusting, butterflies love it. So I actually remember like when I first learned how to trap butterflies before my master's, I was in Peru and they were doing a butterfly project with the same type of traps. And they were using rotten banana, which I also use, but they were also using rancid fish, I think, as one of the baits. But they had to put, they were studying like the different levels of the canopy. So they would like hoist the traps all the way up, like I can't even remember, like I think 100 meters up into the forest canopy. And like you would be hoisting up the trap and there would just be like rancid fish juice like raining down on you because like you had to get it so high up, and then the trap would get like stuck on branches and like, oh my god. And then that's like 5% of it, and then the rest of it is just staring at a computer screen. So that's the life of a biologist.
Oh no, yeah, that is so true. Like, no, I basically I basically do the same thing. Like on my feed, you'll see all like the pictures of animals and snakes and stuff, but like that is what 1% of what I've been doing in the last like 3 years or so. Most of it was just like
Yeah.
doing like doing lab work or wading through muck or stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much, yeah. I totally relate to that. Although like you certainly have more field experience than I do. So, but indeed, it's also interesting to think about the fire issue, because when again when we think of fires, we think of something that like the wildfires in Australia last year or in California. We think of fires as something that destroys habitat, that destroys ecosystems. But like you said, fire can also be beneficial, if not even essential, for certain ecosystems to flourish. So again, what do you think there is a bias in like public perception about like how nature operates, so to say?
Yeah, I think it is like something that we could do better in terms of like educating people, like even just in like high school biology kind of a thing, because I mean, yeah, it's a huge topic and it is so important and it's so relevant. Like just where I live in Canada, we have really strong forest fire seasons in the summer as well. And like right now, there's huge, I think there's like 7,000 hectares of forest burning in my master's thesis like site right now where I just was. Like it's not going to be there anymore. So like it's just a global issue. Basically, like my understanding is that every ecosystem in the world where there is fire, which is pretty much all of them, there's a fire regime. So that regime is a pattern of how often fires occur there and how severe. So if it's a tropical rainforest, the fire regime might be very, very infrequent. Like there might be fire, like, I don't know, every 50 years or every 100 years. Whereas if you look at a grassland ecosystem, the natural fire regime is that there is a fire every 4 or 5 years. It's much more frequent, but that fire is going to be a lot less severe. It's going to affect, it won't affect the soil to as deep of a level. And it'll just basically clear like the top level of vegetation. So the important part is to maintain that fire regime. So if you live in a grassland ecosystem, we should maintain that every 4 or 5 years that there's a fire. And if we do that artificially with prescribed fire, then that's an option to consider. If you live in a tropical area, the fire regime, it's not meant to be burning every 5 years. And that is an area where we like need to look at what are the activities that are making this more frequent than it should be. So it's completely region dependent, but it's essential to understand and for the public to understand what is the normal frequency and severity of fire and how we can maintain that.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, I know very little about fire ecology, but indeed, like everything, even sometimes I remember seeing it in documentaries, like on Animal Planet or Discovery Channel, where the host would be like bashing fires as something like, and then publicly advocating for fire suppression, which in the end, which like probably would make you cringe because that's a recipe for disaster. Like based on what you said, that fire is a crucial part of.
And ironically, like that fire suppression is what leads to worse fires. Like the fire suppression creates more fire because if you're suppressing and excluding fire, that means that the biomass is building up. And the fire that later occurs, inevitably at some point, is going to be huge and destructive because there's so much fuel to burn. So that fire suppression message, like no fires, keep the fires out, firefighting 100%, that's what leads to these massive destructive fires in part, and also in part due to climate change and other factors. So it's ironic. It's kind of backwards.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then so again, going further back in time. So like I remember you. So you just after maybe even during your bachelor years or just after graduating, you also did something that is sort of like let's call it the grand tour for. And for an aspiring wildlife conservationist, so joining expeditions to tropical countries, research stations in the tropics, and doing research there for a limited amount of time before returning home. Until you, but then you felt that something was off about that. That it was not all rainbows and butterflies. That pun not intended. All rainbows and butterflies, as it often looks like, at least on social media as well. So, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that was a big learning experience in a lot of ways. Basically, like, when I was younger and I wanted to be a biologist, I think a lot of biologists can relate, where you see, like, on TV, on Discovery Channel or whatever, like, the classic, like, Steve Irwin type person who's like bushwhacking through the forest and there's a camera crew and you're finding animals and it's amazing. And that was like my career goal. I didn't know what it was or what I needed to do to attain it, but I'm like, that's going to be me. And once I started, I got the opportunity and the crazy amount of privilege and like financial ability to do one of those trips where you get to go to the rainforest and do those kinds of surveys. Because they are crazy expensive. I went and like I was there for the animals and the wildlife and the experience, but I also from the very beginning was really excited to meet the people. That was one of my favorite things. Like when I saw that there was a site with like a village nearby or like some kind of interaction with people, I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I want to like meet the people. So luckily I studied not luckily, on purpose I studied Spanish before I went, and I picked it up quite quickly because I started in Peru and then I later moved to a site in Honduras, and I was there for 4 summers. And from the beginning I was interacting a lot with the local people, a lot more than other people were, partly because of the language barrier, but people don't tend to make the effort. If you go and your goal is to learn about how to like set camera traps and study jaguars, you're not really going to be interested in like asking the guides about like what they do for money for the other 10 months of the year. So that was something that I paid a lot of attention to, and very early on heard a lot of mixed reviews. Like the local people were obviously happy to have, the income for a couple months. They're interested to learn about what's going on. Very kind and friendly people, so they like to meet us, like foreign people. But at the same time, like it's just heartbreaking and very frustrating to know that you're a part of a project like that. That's the point, is to conserve the ecosystem. And yet the local people are telling you, well, yeah, when you guys leave, like we're back to farming coffee because we still have no financial ability to support ourselves, and therefore we can't support this ecosystem. And so people are back to cutting down, clearing land to farm coffee. They're back to hunting bushmeat to sell, to make a living. They're back to doing these things that is like a necessity for them to survive. And so it's like, how can we say that we are a conservation expedition when really we're just collecting data so we can write our own master's theses back in England or wherever else? That's not what conservation is. So I realized that actually quite early on, but I kept going anyway because I had quite strong relationships with a lot of those local people. And I had a little bit of leverage to support their local businesses. So a lot of people carve, actually, I think I have some around my house, carve like little animal figures and sell them to like the local people. They would sell their t-shirts. They would sell their like embroidery of like animals and stuff, sell their coffee. So I kind of could form that connection between the foreigners and the local community. And that was part of the reason I kept going, so that I could continue to support those businesses, even though it wasn't a sustainable model at all.
Yeah, just 1 second. I'm going to charge my laptop because I noticed that my battery is about to leave us.
That is very important.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm back. So, indeed, but about especially the last thing you mentioned, the fact that indeed you said that in the end most of the people that you were working with there were just there to gather, collect data for their thesis, and then they would go back home and write their thesis, possibly publish it, but then with little like results or outcome for the ecosystem or the local community. And so this at least from what I understood, this falls into concept that actually I learned about from you first, and is defined by the term parachute science. So would you, for those in the audience who don't know about it, would you be able to explain what parachute science is and why it is so deleterious in the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the term parachute scientist, our friend Nazreen was the first one who told me about parachute science. Nazreen Peer from South Africa. She's on Instagram as well. And like, it's basically like an image of what that science is. You literally just like come in like, ooh, hello. You just like from out of nowhere. A lot of time people don't have research permits or work permits. You just pick a place and you go. And you do whatever you want to do, take your data, take your samples, and then you just whoop, right back out. And it has a lot of names, but I like the parachute imagery is very accurate. And I mean, here's the thing, like a lot of times it can involve a lot of different kinds of scientists. It could even involve like other different like fields, like technical fields, but for me, the problem is like, if we're going to be doing that, let's just call it what it is. Like that's imperialism. Like that's just us taking advantage of a community for our own benefit. And if that's what you're doing, then just say that. And then, then I don't have any problem. Like if you're going to be honest about it, okay, we're taking advantage of another country. At least we're all on the same page. But the problem for me is that we go in with this mindset and we are told and telling ourselves and, all patting each other's on the back because we're doing conservation. Ooh, we're protecting this ecosystem. We're supporting this community with our income. We're working towards a long-term goal. We're working towards, more financial stability in the region, blah, blah, blah. No, we're not doing that. Like, stop telling lies. Like, we're not doing conservation. We're not putting into place any kind of long-term infrastructure that will support the conservation of that ecosystem. We may be supporting the local economy, but maybe only for a few weeks or maybe for half the year, but it's not long-term. It's not sustainable. So in the end, we're really not contributing anything long term. It's completely short term. So that's where my problem is. Don't call it conservation when it's not conservation. Just say what you're doing. You're going on a working vacation, and your money is not going to stay in the region, and nobody in the local area is going to benefit from your presence, but you're taking a vacation, so that's good.
Oh yeah, I remember in this regard reading a great, absolutely an enlightening book called The Big Conservation Lie, which I highly recommend to everyone here, written by Kenyan carnivore ecologist Dr. Mordecai Ogada. And he, at some point in the book, he basically blew my mind by asking one simple question, and that question was, when was the last time you saw a black man on Animal Planet? And it's when you think about it, like when you think about like all the big conservation personalities, like you mentioned Steve Irwin, and also even Jane Goodall, or and so on, like that work who work in the tropics, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. You see that there is so little involvement of the people who actually live there and are in contact with that reality day in and day out. It's mostly foreigners coming in, setting up their own activity, and sometimes producing great research. I'm not denying that, but still there is something fundamentally wrong with that. At least I think, again, also thanks to your communication work. So, what as a Western biologist yourself, so how do you think that we can avoid repeating that? So that what should like an aspiring conservationist or wildlife biology from Europe or North America do and not do when it comes to work in another country?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question because it's unequivocally wrong, this model that, I have participated in and that a lot of people participate in.
Yeah, I have too. I mean, I'm not claiming not to be part of this.
And most of us have. And I mean, kind of it's wrong and it doesn't work. And I think it's also important to acknowledge, like, part of the reason that comes up, I mean, first of all, is lack of education. For us, like, even with multiple degrees, like, if you do a biology degree, nobody ever teaches you, like, there's never a required class about, the economics of conservation, or like they never center, conservationists of other, like, of color, essentially, or like from any marginalized groups. It's always the classic Steve Irwin, Jane Goodall, David Attenborough, like, it's always the Western white people. So, I mean, from just an education standpoint, like, we don't know. Like, and we need to know, and the fact that we're not being educated in universities, we need to take that education on ourselves. And also, it doesn't help that getting a job in conservation or in biology is, I mean, next to impossible. It's so undervalued. It's hard to get paid. It's hard to support yourself. And so the answer that a lot of us have is like, okay, well, I need to do an internship, or I need to get some experience somehow. I can't get a job because there are no jobs. So, I mean, we just kind of need to recognize, like, the work environment as well, and the way that biologists and conservationists are undervalued in our society. If it were easier to be like, oh, I live in Canada, let me go to the university, or let me go to some kind of organization, and maybe I can get a job doing something in my own backyard, I would probably be less motivated to seek that opportunity in the first place. So, that's just like a little bit of context, but regardless, like, we do need to take it on ourselves to like, break that cycle and educate ourselves, and to not engage in that. So that's just like step one. There are other ways to engage in the kind of traveling biology as well. So one of my answers was to do my master's with a Mexican university. So that was something, I mean, still up until now, I haven't had any issues. Like, I was mentored by Mexican scientists. I paid my tuition to a Mexican university. Everything about my experience was to support the Mexican research infrastructure. There was nothing, like, I wasn't involved with anybody in Canada. So I think that is one option that I think is great. You're actually contributing to the science that the local researchers are doing. And I think there's ways to also travel more responsibly as well. It's not to say that we can't do these kinds of expeditions, because it's a great opportunity for tourism. I think just being able to do that similar kind of like expedition type tourism, but doing it with a local organization or multiple local organizations, to ensure that your money is actually supporting the local economy and not just getting taken immediately back to the United States or Europe or wherever. I think that's another good option. It's not to say we can't do it. We just have to be mindful and put in the time and the effort to find a responsible way to do it.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree, and indeed, I'm really happy that that we discussed this point like head on in the interview, and also at the least I do see some. I think that there is some change going on, especially in younger generations about this, where at least the topic of parachute science and social injustice in conservation is addressed more and more. As an example, we have a comment here from our mutual friend Isa, an entomologist from Pennsylvania. I interviewed her for the first episode of the Snakeman's Lair. Hi Isa, it's great to have you here. And she says that these ideas that you just discussed are definitely on her mind as she prepares for her Fulbright fellowship in Indonesia. Well, first of all, congratulations on the fellowship, Isa. Absolutely well deserved, and we wish you all the best for it. And of course, yeah, I think that Becky will be really happy to hear that you will be keeping all this in mind when you go there. And speaking of the comments section, since we are almost an hour in the interview, I say, well, if you have any questions for Becky or any points that you wish to address, feel free to let us know in the comments. Just speak out, and we will get to it. And back to us, Becky. I wanted to, since you mentioned that indeed it could still, like, scientific tourism can still be a great opportunity for conservation. I think I wanted to mention the fact that you were a guide recently enough. At least you were a guide for an expedition organized by Atlas Obscura in Mexico about I think it was about the monarch butterfly migration, but I could be wrong.
No, that was it.
All right, perfect. So what was that experience like? Like, how did they contact you, and what did they offer you that was convincing enough for you to accept?
Yeah, that's a great question. I met them through Instagram, so that is great, and I'm a huge fan. It was interesting because their organization, from what I know, is based in the United States. So, I mean, on the surface level, you could definitely say like, this is like a similar iteration of what I had already participated in. When I first spoke with their people, I asked them, like, what is the advantage of hiring somebody like me over hiring a Mexican person? Because this is not like, I am, I guess, technically an expert in Mexican butterflies at this point, but there are plenty of Mexican experts in butterflies. So that was one of the first things I brought up to them. And I was convinced because we are all very similarly minded. Actually, Jason Goldman is one of the people who hired me, and he is a really great journalist on conservation journalism. He focuses a lot on like traditional knowledge and a lot of the similar issues that I have kind of noticed in my experiences. He has also kind of addressed and worked towards in his journalism. So I know that they're both we're all very similar minded. And they essentially told me, like, their little section of the company is a startup, and their goal is to work towards having more local people involved. So they basically said, like, can you help us to like work towards that? Like, this will not be necessarily a permanent thing. And I took that quite seriously to heart when I was on the expedition. I recruited a couple of young Indigenous guides from one of the sanctuaries that we were at, and still in touch with them, hoping like whenever COVID's over, like they'll have our full support to get more involved in the organization. So it's kind of a tough question to answer because it does on the surface level seem similar to a lot of the problematic things that I've brought up. But I was encouraged that at the direction that they are working towards going to. And I think we do need to give credit to people who are looking for those solutions and recognize that these kinds of things don't necessarily happen overnight. And we need to take as many opportunities as we can and try whatever we can to make something better. And, if it doesn't work, we need to be recognizing that. But I'm very optimistic. I got to work with a lot of Mexican biologists on that trip, and I'm hoping that I can continue to contribute to that post-COVID.
Oh yeah, I definitely wish you all the best in that respect, and I have no doubt you will definitely make your voice heard when it comes to advocating for a more just conservation practice, not only in Mexico but in general. And yeah, speaking of Mexico, indeed, like I definitely think you're so right about the fact that. Indeed, there are definitely encouraging signals. Although, I mean, I certainly don't have the experience that you do on this topic. But again, from what I know about, even just taking Mexico as a case, as an example, the amount of biodiversity there is just insane. Like even I'm more of a I'm into more into snakes, and even when it comes to that, it's an insane hotspot for any kinds of rattlesnakes and coral snakes and such. And I know of people, dedicated local people in Mexico, who are trying to carve out some opportunities for ecotourism with the centering reptiles as well. So I really see great potential in that area, and I hope you will still be a part of this change in years to come. Which also brings up my last question for you. So, of course, right now with the pandemic going on, everything relating to the future is uncertain. But when it comes to like your what you see, what you envision for yourself in the short and long term as well, like what are do you have any particular aspirations or goals that you want to work for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to be completely honest. Like, I think a lot of scientists have kind of like a post-master's life crisis after any degree, because it's just like, they're not like long-term career moves. So then you're kind of just being like, okay, like what's now? So I'm really excited about the work that I'm doing with Parks Canada right now. But I am only on a contract for 1.5 years. So I will be fulfilling that contract. I have a kind of like I have one side project that I'm working on for Honduras, probably for 2022. I mean, it's still in the very stages of infancy, but I'm hoping that things will go well there, because it could be a really great opportunity to kind of work against some of those wrongs that I've been doing in Honduras, to kind of make things right and to improve things in terms of ecotourism there. So wish me luck on that. I'm hoping that I will get to work with Atlas Obscura again, but also COVID pending. I'm just like so lucky that I have something to do while everything with COVID gets sorted out. And then after that, I mean, like long term, I think it would be great to be able to continue working in this kind of like just improving ecotourism, supporting existing ecotourism infrastructure in these kinds of places where I have contacts and where I can give support. And the goal would be to work myself out of a job, like to be able to support a few organizations for them to be self-sustaining and to completely like not be doing that anymore. So we'll see where that goes. And in terms of like a super long-term thing, I mean, I would love to work in like international governance, or just like even in Canadian government, anything political. I really like research, but I'm kind of sick of like the whole like politics of it. So I don't know, I'm kind of open-minded.
Oh, and speaking of projects, Isa is already asking saying that she's curious about what type of project you would be going to do in Honduras, because she has a colleague that has been working there, and maybe she can ask through DM later. But you see, that's like peak peak scientist talk. Like as soon as you hear something about about a project design, you immediately reach out and say, "Man, I may be happy. I may be able to, connect and do something together." So that's.
I love that. Yeah, it's like just in very infancy stages, Isa. So I'm afraid to jinx it. To be honest, it's not like fully nailed down, but like an ecotourism project. Hopefully, we'll see.
No spoilers.
Don't want to jinx it. Knock on wood.
All right. So yeah. Isa again is saying
We'll chat. We'll connect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll leave you. I leave it to you and Isa to discuss in private. And since we've reached the 1 hour mark, I unfortunately have to close the interview. And believe me, it's not easy because this has been so interesting. I'd happily go on for a long time still, but
me too. I'm so grateful for your open-mindedness and that we've found so many common grounds. I really appreciate all your thoughtful questions. Thanks, Lorenzo.
Oh well, thanks to you for being here in the first place. And I'm not even going to say, as I usually do, that I hope that the audience learned something from it, because I am dead sure that everyone did this time, since this is unfortunately still not stuff that you hear regularly. So I'm grateful that you accepted to share your experiences and your knowledge with us. So thank you again, Becky, and thank you everyone who attended the talk, which will still be available here on Haps and on YouTube for you to go back to whenever you please. And as for the Snakeman's Lair, we will be back on Wednesday already, on the 31st, with another great guest, Fortunate Mafeta Paka from South Africa. He is a herpetologist working on frogs. Oh yeah, he's really great. You will definitely. I hope to see you all there, because he definitely has great stories and great knowledge to share. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Becky, and I hope to see you all soon for the next episode of the Snakeman's Lair.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Right. Goodbye, everyone. Pleasure to have you here. See you soon.